G'day everybody! How's it going out there? Well, this week we're going to be covering something that hasn't been, a kind of topic that hasn't been covered on Flayra, and sometimes for the better, I would argue. But in essence, when a furry passes on, I think it's very important to have a discussion on their life and what they meant to other fellow fandom nerds such as themselves. And also reflect upon, what their life meant to others and, some lessons that you can kind of learn from it. So one of the most and I'm very happy that this article was very well received, and it was contributed by somebody other than myself, which is also something I really do love to see. So Game Popper here is a UK fur, is a fur from the United Kingdom, and so they're well versed within the furry fandom of the United Kingdom. In this article, he talks about himself making a book about the history of furry fandom in the United Kingdom, and one of the people he interviewed for that book, unfortunately, had passed away. Ian Curtis here was born in 1946 and died around May of 2021. Now, why are we talking about it now? Well, the article, as you can see, was only published on September of 19th. And one of the big reasons that the story goes over for this is because the individual in question was pretty recluse. It's kind of one of those ideas and facts that kind of hits close to home for someone like myself who is also pretty recluse. And you go back and you think, it's like, well, if I wasn't making YouTube videos and I wasn't making weekly streaming sessions, then I myself, if I had passed on, heaven forbid, but if I had passed on, it would take probably a few days before people would recognize that. Probably people at my workplace would notice first, obviously, but the furry fandom itself might take a week or two to figure that out. For Ian there, it was months. According to the law enforcement, they found him dead in his home in May. But the wonderful thing about reading about the individual's life, and they lived a long, long life, is how their contributions to the furry fandom and establishing a furry presence within the United Kingdom, and the subtle ways in which they did it. They never, they didn't get on a stage. They didn't, they weren't front and center. They allowed their enjoyment of furry content and sharing their enjoyment of furry content with others allowed organic spread of more furriness in the UK, where those are the people who do really good for a community are those who don't take all the oxygen out of the room, worrying about whether or not their ideas of what furry is the thing that is imprinted upon the fandom. More or less, they lay down the groundwork, and then people will have, their own, sessions on there. One of the biggest things in that article too is especially in the context of these other videos that I've done recently about conventions, is that while I do talk about size and large conventions and things like that, it is very important to understand that to have a community or to create a small community of fellow fans and friends is you don't need to go to a convention to find those things. You don't need to create a convention to find those things. You can have small little house groups with a smaller cluster of people who you find you really click with, right? And creating smaller groups can sometimes lead to getting up to those stronger groups. Most larger conventions start as small house parties that get too big. And so then it's like, okay, we've got this gathering of furries. let's do this in a larger scale, and those are kind of how those kind of things start. So when a lot of people who talk about the good old days of the fandom, who wish to start larger conventions trying to encapsulate, that good old day spirit of the fandom, they may have a challenge doing so, because to create a convention in and of itself is to create a large organization and to create a large entity, which may not be able to encapsulate that small town home feeling. One political sort of cartoon that was recently released by one of those organizations had like a pair of furries trying to grill while the rest of the fandom was being silly in the background, right? But the essence is that a convention is not a grill, right? A convention is not a small homey gathering at somebody's house where they're grilling burgers and getting together and sitting together and talking about things and having the time to have interaction and discussion without having to worry about what panel is when what's going on in main events. Where's the zoo? Let me see what's going on. I got to go back to my room and put my fursuit on and then walk 30 minutes to the gathering, right? A smaller gathering can be very, very beneficial to local communities and to things like that. So, I mean, to me, if you're looking at, it's easy in the internet age to see the big things and to try to chase those things. But in the end of the day, if you're looking for things that are more intimate and you can have a more intimate interaction with furry fans and actually show them, things you like about the fandom and things like that. Going to smaller meets may be a better idea. That being said, it being smaller and more more finite and close space, certain people might find, that's where the nuances about what you enjoy in the fandom versus what somebody else might be a lot more stringent. As in, if you go to a big furry convention and hang out with a group and then that group ends up not being for you because they drink too much or they rabble-rouse a bit too much, they do too much of the woo-hoos or the ooh-woos, right? You can go, okay, I'm going to go over here to this writing panel and enjoy yourself there without having to, interact with that individual anymore, which is one of the strengths of a larger convention. One of but that's sort of the weakness of a smaller gathering, is that if you end up with a group that, basically is in it for one thing and you're not in it for that, then you should be prepared to, grace. And also go with somebody who you really trust, right? And do those kind of safety things. Luckily, and fortunately, none of these, these small gatherings of 30 for this guy didn't have any issues, didn't have any problems. But this person contributed to his own small group, and he made the most out of the fandom, and he collected a lot of memorabilia and things like that, and he had a good life. And my hope is that furries also take that into consideration when if you're going through, what you want to do in the fandom and who you want to hang out with and what you want to have, is understanding that you don't have to expend a bunch of resources to go to a convention. You just have to, know the locals, get small meets going, and if you want to get larger gatherings going based on those small meets and saying, hey, we had a small meeting in the this, that, and the other thing, communicating this, let's get a spreadsheet together and let's knock out a small little club that we can have a monthly meeting or a meeting every 3 months and have 20 people show up and invite and etc. And they each contribute a small amount of money towards sort of a pot to have to BYOB or to have food and games and things like that, or to go out and do bowling or whatever. Always remember that and especially during these times where larger gatherings and traveling can be somewhat of a pain, refocusing on the small and refocusing on the local may be more beneficial to the health of the furry fandom in the long run than focusing on becoming the third convention in a state, right? Just a thought on that. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. If you like this kind of content, kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. Is there any small local meets that you like to go to? And how large are they usually? Do you know of any local furs, and do you do those small meets? And how do you like small meets compared to conventions? It's a good conversation piece, and I think this is a great opportunity to have that conversation. Thank you very much. We'll see you again next time.